All right. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Donnie Lowbree.
And I'm Kirk Prine.
And we are delighted to welcome all of you to another episode of Queer Tribe, where we interview amazing gay luminaries and find out about their views on certain things. So welcome once again. And we particularly want to welcome our invited guest, Jay Cusker. Jay, you're out there. I see you. And where are you hailing from? What part of the world?
Portland, Oregon.
Portland, Oregon. Hooray. We are delighted to have Jay, and we're going to ask him all kinds of questions in just a moment. But before I do that, I'm going to give you a little introduction and tell you a little bit about him. So for those of you who may not know him, Jay is moved to the Bay Area in 2004. He was in the Bay Area before he came to Portland, and he returned to school, therefore, a master's in psychology as a marriage and family therapist, specializing in drama therapy. At that time, he met Kirk, my husband here, and was blessed to become a member of the Flesh and Spirit community. Through Flesh and Spirit, Jay became involved in the drum circles and started the exploration of altered states of consciousness through shamanic journey work. Jay served as a therapist with diverse populations and settings, community health, and as a school counselor in Montana and Washington. In 2020, Jay moved to Portland, Oregon, working in community health, and is currently in a group practice with Spectrum Counseling, serving the LGBTQ community and their family systems. Through years of experience as a therapist, it became clear that traditional therapies and medications were not effectively beneficial to some clients. Just as psilocybin therapy was becoming available for use in Oregon, meaning plant therapy, I learned that word today, Jay is completing a practicum with Ketamine, and in April 2023 will become certified as a Psilocybin Facilitator, working with plant therapy.
There, that's a mouthful.
That was a mouthful.
There we go.
We got most of it out.
Facilitated a lot of success.
Yes.
Great. So we're going to ask all of you on the call to go ahead and mute yourself for this first maybe 25 minutes, and then we'll open up the line for questions and comments that you might have for Jay.
And I'm going to pin Jay, so he's going to be nice and big. Everyone wants to be nice and big. Okay, here we go. There you are, Jay.
All right. Surrounded by the trees. So,
that's beautiful.
So welcome, beloved, and it's a joy. You live in my heart already. So it's nice to see you surrounded by the trees as we welcome you into this space. So tell us about your spiritual journey, your awakening, some stories around that might help us be informed as to who you are, and as you answer the other two questions about being a part of the queer tribe or a vision for us. So jump in.
First off, I'd like to say it's kind of humbling to be here. I didn't expect to be asked. And when I was like, okay, I can do that. And then I had moments of like, well, why are they asking me? I'm not an author. I'm not a photographer. I haven't written books. And I'm not as renowned as some of the great men that have been featured on the Queer Tribe conversations. But then I realized that I have a message that needs to be shared.
Absolutely.
Just like we all do. And we all have stories that we need to tell. So I'm going to step forward and tell my story today. But I'd like to start with a poem by Jeff Foster. And the poem is called The Secret of All Healing. Don't try to love yourself. The trying is self-hatred. The trying is exactly what depletes you. Instead, make room for the part of you that doesn't love, or doesn't know how, or mistrusts love, or was never taught it. Hold that fragile part of you in loving awareness. Breathe into the battle inside. Infuse your non-acceptance with inquisitive attention. Immerse your frustration in meditation. Don't try to love yourself. Simply oxygenate the unloved one. Don't try to love yourself. Simply oxygenate the loved one. The Good Medicine Society wrote that breathing goes hand in hand with moving energy, whether you're healing, boosting, or grounding. Conscious breathing has so many physiological and etheric benefits. Conscious breathing oxygenates our brain and our cells, focuses our attention, and strokes the etheric fire emerging from our chakras. We are energetic beings, and breathing turns the switch on.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to invite you to join me in taking 3 deep breaths to oxygenate ourselves and to turn our switches on. And as you breathe in and think I. And as you breathe out, I am. So breathing in, I, breathing out, I am. Go ahead, start. Deep breath in, I.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
Thank you. Thank you for joining me in that. When I was thinking about my spiritual journey, I recognized that a lot of my spiritual journey intersects with my psychedelic experiences. My spiritual evolution is part of my psychedelic experiences. And then I thought, well, that totally makes sense because the psychedelic itself means soul, mind manifesting. And so much of my spiritual work, my spiritual experiences have been soul, mind manifesting. And that's why I'm here today. First memory of a spiritual pathway that was open for me, and I'm using the term pathway consciously because psychedelics work to open neural pathways in the brain to perceive things differently and to work with things differently. But the first spiritual pathway that I remember encountering was when I was 8 years old and in Sunday school in church. I was raised in a Lutheran church in Montana. My mother was Norwegian, and most Norwegians are Lutheran, as Jan can attest to that. And I was so in love with Jesus. And I remember it was a Sunday day, and I was so excited to ask the teacher. I just had this huge question I needed to ask him. And the sunlight was streaming in the windows. There was in the basement of the church. And I went up to the teacher and I said, how can I become like Jesus? And he said, you can't. You were born a sinner. You will die a sinner. And looking back on it now, that was probably the first seed that was planted in my religious trauma. Well, I didn't give up on Jesus, and I didn't give up on God. And the farm that I grew up on, it was a ranch. It was homesteaded by my grandfather, who I'm named after. Has 2 rivers that come together through it and flow together, the Bitterroot and the Clark Fork in Missoula, Montana. And Clark went one way and Lewis went the other way, supposedly is the story. And up above the flatland where the cattle are and the alfalfa fields and stuff is a hill. And I had this vision of camaraderie with fellow men building a stone chapel hand by hand and creating this area that we could be together in community and share that with. At that time, the film Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon came out. And I became a huge fan of St. Francis. And I use his prayer as a mantra every day, make me an instrument of your peace. But I imagine standing in that chapel and looking over the valley, and in the stars his handiwork I see, on the wind he speaks with majesty, though he ruleth over land and sea. What is that to me? Then I started listening to the sermons at church. I mean, really listening. and I heard them talking about condemning men who have sex with men. I was coming into my sexuality and my identity then, and I thought I had feelings for men, and I didn't know what to do with it. And then, of course, they started the sermons with Sodom and Gomorrah. And I was a sodomite. I was becoming one of them. I was starting to think like I was one of them. And what would I do with that? Because I was raised being told that you are judged by the people you associate with.
Mm.
Now I look at it and I go, wow, I wonder how many great teachers I missed out with learning from because I didn't want to be associated with them.
Mm-hmm.
That shit.
Mm-hmm.
My internalized homophobia became so intense I wouldn't allow myself to be truthful for who I was. And my next spiritual pathway that opened for me happened when I lived in Los Angeles. And I was working in a bar in Melrose and La Cienega, and there was a metaphysical store called the Bodhi Tree close by.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason, I was drawn to the Bodhi Tree, and I started getting into crystals, and self-help books would jump off the shelf at me. And it was like, wow, I'm getting this. I'm starting to find a spiritual connection where I'm not sensing any judgment or any criticism. And it's encouraging me to explore who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Course in Miracles was out then because it was the middle of the AIDS pandemic, which I was so scared of. It was horrifying to me that I might get AIDS and be outed and have to come to grips with who I was in a manner that I wasn't ready for. So I read and studied the Course in Miracles, and it really helped me. But we left Los Angeles, and part of that was my fear of the AIDS pandemic and what it could mean for my life. And the law of attraction says we attract the things we fear. So that became part of my life.
Mm.
Moved to Northern California in the Sierra foothills, and there I joined a metaphysical group and started learning about Native American philosophies. The medicine cards opened a new spiritual pathway for me. And I traveled to the Bay Area to study with Elliot Cohen, who wrote the book Plant Spirit Medicine.
Mm.
Taught us how to journey and to meet the spirit of the plant, to give the plant some tobacco, to ask permission to communicate with it, to learn from it, to absorb it, and to sense what its essence was like.
Mm.
We could even taste the plant, and then we would go back, and there were a group of 20 of us. We would lay on the ground, and Elliot would drum, and we would do journey work to meet the spirit of the plant.
Mm.
And every single person in that circle came back with the essence or the entity or an image of what that plant was like, along with the medicines that the plant could provide for us if we were open to them.
Mm.
Indigenous people got to know plants, and I imagine that's how they came to understand psilocybin. Or it could have been just a fluke and accident, and somebody started realizing that it was creating something different in their brain.
Mm.
One of the things that we also did within the circle was find the power animal for someone else. And I was partnered with a young man who asked me to find his power animal. We went in and did the journey. And it came out very clearly that otter was his power animal. And when we came out of the journey work, I told him, and he said, yeah, that's so right. And it's so interesting for me because in the medicine cards, otter is playful. And if this young man were gay, he would have been categorized as an otter.
Mm-hmm.
But also in the medicine cards, the otter represents female energy. And my sense of this young man was that he was pretty androgynous, or really didn't have to have a gender identified to him.
Mm-hmm.
Also during that time, I got to come to San Ramon and meet Ama Chi
Mm-hmm.
in her ashram in San Ramon, and she's the hugging guru.
Mm-hmm.
You stand in line for hours and have a meal of vegan food, great food, and listen to chant and participate in chants, and eventually you get up to the front where she hugs you. And I was able to do that twice. And the second time that I went to see Ama, there was a snake, a large snake that was crossing the road. I had to stop to let it go, and it was yellow and black striped. And I thought, well, this is really interesting because snake for the Native Americans symbolizes transmutation or shedding your skin. And that time that Amachi hugged me, I had such an opening. I had a full Shakti experience. I could not stop shaking for 2 hours. And I cried all the way home to Sutter Creek, where I lived. During that time when I lived in Sutter Creek, I also had a gallery, and we produced a drum circle or a drum festival for the town. And we closed down the town for a couple of days, weekend in July. And the entire town was filled with drums and didgeridoos and drum making demonstrations. And then we would have a concert in the evening and ended with a Sacramento Taiko Dan, the Japanese drummers. One year our theme about the drum festival was a universal heartbeat. So some of my spiritual work was already included in some of my drumming and some of my journey work. In 2000, I had cancer. I'm a cancer survivor. And part of my growth and my spiritual growth and reckoning with the manifestation of my cancer, what was the role that I played in that? I did some work in some self-help books and started studying. And the tumor was a lime-sized tumor trapped between my large and small intestines. So my filter system was clogged. I wasn't filtering things accurately. When I discovered the role that I was playing, I recognized that I was suppressing my thoughts and feelings and my needs to fulfill the needs of others and to make others happy. And the tumor needed to be removed. Shortly after that, I moved to the Bay Area and began school. Before I started school, I volunteered at Shanti in their drop-in center and was working with a lot of the homeless clients. That's where I had my first exposure to crystal meth. And only because I looked it up on the internet and realized that the ingredients include Drano and battery acid and amino. And I'm thinking, why are people put ammonia? I'm thinking, why are people putting this in their bodies? So that totally turned me off from even desiring to try that. I also volunteered at Zen Hospice and worked there for a year and worked with the dead, the death and dying and loss and grief with that. And then I met Kirk Prine and was introduced to Flesh and Spirit. And in the meeting, Kirk told me about the message and the objective and the reason for the purpose for Flesh and Spirit and meeting spirituality. And I was pretty sure that I wanted to join, but he said, go home and think about it and let me know tomorrow. And I resounded with a yes, 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 yes. And I'm so grateful for that. But Flesh and Spirit also let me expand on my shamanic journey work with Drum Circle. My partner and I led the East Bay Drum Circle for a couple of years and really, really enjoyed it. And I was also part of a journey work group through Flesh and Spirit. Someone else was leading one. And then I graduated as a therapist. In 2010, we moved from the Bay Area to Texas. And in Texas, I met Toby. Several jobs I was working in Texas were community health. I also worked as a bereavement counselor and a volunteer trainer for a hospice, which was phenomenal for me. I did that for a couple of years and really came to appreciate the process of dying. I'm a huge fan of Stephen Jenkinson. I don't know if anyone's heard of him, but he wrote a book and has a documentary called Die Wise. I would highly recommend it. And then I moved from Texas to Montana, worked in community health there, and then Washington in community health. And on May 16th of 2020, I just happened to be on Scruff one day, and I sent a woof to a guy that I saw that looked like a lot of fun. He had a black top hat on and was kind of tilting it up. And I thought, well, this guy looks like he's fun. He's a jokester. A trickster was my immediate sense of him. And So I sent him that, and two other things that were really intriguing about this guy to me. He was a shaman. He did shamanic work, and he had done ayahuasca journeys. I had started growing functional mushrooms at that time. I was growing oysters and lion's mane, just getting the little kits, and I became really curious about it. And then I started studying the effects of psilocybin and the studies that have been done with that. And I became fascinated with that. And this was the time that Oregon was just getting ready to enact and make psilocybin available to people to decriminalize it. And I thought, well, this is perfect timing. And so that person I was talking about is John Kinsey. He's on the here. And we met a couple of times. And then in August 2020, I moved here and started working community health. And then a year later, moved into working with spectrum counseling with the LGBTQ community and their family systems. But we finally got to do our ayahuasca journey. That was one of my intentions of meeting Jan. I'd really like to share that experience for you, because that was one of the beginning of my great experiences with psychedelics. It was another circle, and we're probably 20 people in that circle. And we did it 2 nights in a row, a beautiful setting in the woods and amazing music, very open. And the second night of our journey, we did 2 nights of journey. And the second night was the one where I really opened. I could feel the music. I could feel what was going on. The visions were amazing. The feelings and sensations were great. But I was visited by my ancestors, particularly my grandfather, who I was named after. And I've talked about him as the homesteader of the farm ranch in Montana. And he said, "I'm proud of you." And I was shocked, because I was aware that he was aware of what I was doing. And he was also one of the first men that ever told me that he was proud of me. I have images of him as a young man with a coffee cup and tapping on it when we were having dinner. And that meant that my grandmother needed to fill his coffee cup. My grandfather said, "You are the one that we have been waiting for." And he explained that because of who I am and the way I am, the way I'm built, who I love, I'm going to break the toxic masculinity, the historical toxic masculinity that runs through my family lineage. I grew up being told that I could not cry. Big boys don't cry. I was told that you can't wear pink. I shared this with the group after integration when we were discussing what our journeys were like. And there were a lot of people that had ancestral healings and fathers visiting, grandfathers and parents visiting during that journey. It was a collective. And a lot of the collective expression had to do with the fact that the Me Too movement was going on at that point. And we were all going, "This is wrong. This has got to change." But I also told them that I never wore pink. So the group got me a pink shirt. And at the end of it, I described the experience, which to me is a very feminine experience. I told them that the experience, the journey for me was juicy. I quoted Kirk Prine. Kirk was probably the first person I ever heard use juicy so much, and I just adore it. And the group presented me a couple of weeks later with a pink T-shirt that says "juicy" on it.
Great.
I also told the group that because of the journey, I knew who I was going to spend the rest of my life with. And on August 25th of 2020, because of Roe versus Wade and what was happening and coming down the pipeline, we had a shotgun wedding. Jan and I got married in our backyard here. I never thought I would be married. I thought my internalized homophobia wouldn't allow that. It wasn't a possibility for me. And I'm very blessed to be able to do that. The next pathway that opened for me was with psilocybin. And the message for psilocybin that I get which I approached when I went into the training for facilitator training with Intertrek is who I went with, who actually the founder of Intertrek started the proposal to have psilocybin become available for therapeutic usage.
Mm-hmm.
Was the man who started it. The message that I get is to trust the medicine.
Mm.
My whole process through it, because psilocybin is just becoming available now and there's new standards and new rules and stuff. The message is just to trust, and it will happen and it will unfold. But the other message that I get from mushrooms is a connection.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about how mushrooms function,
Mm-hmm.
there's a mycelium network that runs through the entire earth.
Mm-hmm.
And that is where the fruit body, the mushroom itself, comes from. And 97% of all plants are interactive with mushrooms. Mushrooms send messages. They can guide roots to where sources of water are for trees and plants. And the largest mycelium body in the world is located at Blue Mountain in Oregon and is 10 square kilometers.
Mm.
Lama Mike Crowley in Psychedelic Buddhism explains that when meditating or using psychedelics, the user can detach from the rigidity of the brain networks that are formed in early life. New pathways, new ideas become possible once the brain and mind is off from pre-established conceptions of self and ego.
Mm.
What he's talking about is the DMN, which is the default mode network. That's stored in the amygdala, the lizard brain, where we choose to flee, fight, freeze, or fawn. But that's also where trauma is stored. And the neural pathways can work to rewire to, especially with people with PTSD or trauma, to rewire to open new pathways so the trauma can go down other pathways to make it easy to deal with. Mycelium for me is very connecting. Psilocybin is very connecting. We did a couple of journeys in December. And one of my intentions in the journey was to stop drinking. And I also wanted to prove that it's fallible to do that, because studies have shown that it really helps people with addiction. And that was January 3rd, and I have no desire. I didn't have a problem with drinking, but it was a reward I would use after I worked with clients and had a tough day to have a glass of wine. And my vibration has definitely shifted and raised because I stopped doing that. Jan and I have experienced and done work together with MDMA as a couple. MDMA is being used by MAPS now, which is the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. And they're working with it with veterans for PTSD, and they're also using it with couples to strengthen their bond and strengthen their relationships. And Jan and I have committed to actually doing MDMA once a year together.
Hmm.
And then the ketamine experience for me brought everything together. And I think that is what ketamine does. It opens different portals, it opens different pathways, and all of the other pathways kind of came together. All the pieces of the puzzle came together for me in my journey with that. I described it when I came out of it as I was stuck in a luge, and I would just way down deep into it, and the colors and the visions and everything was amazing. And at one point, one of the facilitators came up to me and she whispered in my ear, I'm not going to use her name, but she said, "Hi, Jay, this is Lauren." And I went, "Oh, yes, that is Lauren. That is you. I am you. And we are all you." And then I went, I am everything. I am that, and I am that, and I am that, and I'm that. And I realized the connection is really there. I was part of everything there. Aldous Huxley, in his book, The Door of Perception, described it as, then suddenly my unconscious was lighted up from within, and I saw in a vivid way how the whole universe was made up of particles of material, which, no matter how dull or lifeless they might seem, were nevertheless filled with this intense and vital beauty. What I sensed was that the walls had energy, the corners had energy, and everything had energy and space, and I could feel it.
Mhm.
The shamanic work that I do, I don't attach so much to entity or form with the beings that I encounter, but I sense their essence.
Mhm.
And I'm able to hold on to the essence of everything.
Mhm.
My father passed away on February 3rd, and the thing that I was able to hold on to help me with it was that his essence became even more tangible for me to work with
Mhm.
after he left, was released from his body.
Mhm.
The vision that I have for Queer Tribe, and I think this is perfect timing,
Mhm.
and it all comes and it stems from my spiritual evolution and my experience with psychedelics, is that we are the ones our ancestors dreamed of.
Mhm. Mhm.
Our queer ancestors have been dreaming about us being embodied to be able to do this work now.
Mhm.
And we are all connected.
Mhm.
Part of the message from the ketamine was to me was that I really need to monitor my thoughts, because my thoughts not only affect other people, but they come back to me. So I'm
Mhm.
very conscious and very careful of what I think and the things that I do in my life, because I know that anything I do to someone else is I'm doing to myself. Anything I think negative about someone else, I'm thinking about myself. It comes back to me.
Mhm.
I also think that we're at an incredible time right now because we have an opportunity to work for members of our community that are so severely being marginalized.
Mhm.
Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Buddhist, stated that we are here to awaken from our illusion of separateness. I believe at Queer Tribe, we have chosen to incarnate at this time to assist, probably as a catalyst, certainly as advocates for the shift in the paradigm that's occurring.
Mhm.
We've all experienced some form of trauma as queer people, and because of that, we have empathy and we understand the traumas of others. We, as Queer Tribe, carry ancestral trauma, whether we are aware of it or not. And many of us, our heritages carry additional historical trauma too. Jewish people, Irish people, Italian people that were marginalized when they came to this country. I also believe that because we have experience with trauma, we have the potential to possibly be trauma whisperers.
Mhm.
I certainly do that with my work. The majority of the people that I work with have been traumatized in some way.
Mhm.
And trauma is so different than what we grew up and we thought of it was. We thought of it as being something PTSD that the veterans got, or something really horrible happened in your life. But compounded trauma can add up too.
Mhm.
COVID has been very traumatic for many people.
Mhm.
But in order for us to become trauma whisperers, we need to do the work ourselves. We need to go into there. We need to breathe into the darkness, breathe into the battle inside of each of us. And the good news is that we do have exciting new tools that we can do that with, and that's psychedelics, the psychedelic renaissance. I
Mhm.
also believe that we are the ones that plant spirit medicine ancestors have been dreaming of.
Mhm.
My vision going forward is to be able to work with the medicines, to work with psychedelics, make it more affordable and easy to attain for other people and marginalized people, especially our community, because we have so many issues with substance use, mental health disorders. I'm finding a huge connection with the community that I work, that there's a lot of neurodivergence in the queer community as well. And that includes ADHD, autism. And I'm working with clients to understand those and to embrace those as superpowers, because people that have neurodivergence brains are often so extremely excelling and can do things that I can't even imagine.
Mhm.
I'm kind of in awe with the clients that I work with that are neurodivergent.
Mhm.
But I think to be able to do that, we need to come together and support each other through that. One of the things that I would like to do working with the community is Jan and I would like to work together to work with a group and start probably with a queer men group and do shamanic journey work with therapy in between, processing what the shamanic journey work is. And the shamanic journey work would include journey to the lower world, the middle world, the upper world, identifying our allies and the people that we work with, our power animals, our ancestors, learning to connect with them, to have some therapy sessions with that, and then eventually work up to doing plant spirit medicine work with integration and therapy work following that. I'd like to close with, one other thing I was thinking of with the trans community. I was watching the other day, or a few days ago, a month ago probably, drag shows, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, these people are really warriors. These are what people putting on war paint to fight the patriarchy of the paradigm that we need to shift. Drag queens are warriors, and it takes so much bravery to do that. I want to close with a quote by the Dalai Lama before I open to questions. I belong to the 20th century, an era that is past. I want to share with those of you who are young. If you start to collect the causes now, you'll live to see a happier, peaceful world. Don't be content with present circumstances. Take a more far-sighted view. When the heart is closed, it leads to fear, stress, and anger. Nurturing the idea of oneness, of humanity, has an effect on opening the heart. When you think of all other human beings as brothers and sisters, it's easier to communicate with them. I would like to extend that a little bit further and to just think of extending that to all beings, to all sentient beings, to everything that exists.
Great.
To opening communication to all of those things. Thank you for allowing me to do this. I know I went through it really fast, but I was kind of excited to do it too.
As you quoted me, I'll quote you back. Juicy. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. So at this point, Jay's given us a bunch to chew on and digest and take into our fields. What are your questions or comments, knowing we have about 10 minutes to hear them, but if you want to unmute yourself or raise your hand and unmute yourself, and we'll see what happens.
Why don't you just go ahead and unmute yourself? We may not be able to see you.
Okay.
To see you raise your hand.
Yeah, there are a lot of little boxes.
A lot of little boxes there.
Before we start that, we're open to supporting psychedelic tourism here to Portland, to the Oregon, because it's happening here. It's and we're imagining that psilocybin and MDMA are going to be declassified or lowered in classification, probably to the classification of ketamine. So probably within a year, it will be much more accessible to other people as well.
Yeah.
Because right now it's classified as a 4, which is like heroin.
Yeah.
But psilocybin, there's been no case of addiction to it or use or abuse.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we definitely want to keep this conversation going and maybe even bring you here or us come there for some journey work together. Yeah. So those of you on the call who would like to jump in, just unmute yourself and ask your question or make your comment.
Well, what can I share? Just reflecting off of Jay's story about the ketamine. Years ago now, I had an experience with ketamine. And as I understood it, what happens is that the drug anesthetizes the part of the brain that handles ego. Oh. So you stay conscious, but you aren't the you anymore, that you think you are. part of the experience for me at one point was rising up off my knees and announcing, I am God, and really
Yes.
being God.
Yes, yes. I am that. I am that. And that, and that, and that. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you.
It's often described as a disassociation.
Thank you, Toby.
And I was resistant to it because it is not plant medicine. But the professor who taught us and who leads the program that I will be going into said that it has been found in fungus. The ketamine has been found in fungus. So I just went, yeah, I love you.
Great, great. Anyone else for some closing remarks or questions that are brewing?
Yes, oh, go for it.
Yeah.
Well, just really quick, wanted to say, hi, I'm Roger here, and I have had some really positive experiences with, working with a professional with psilocybin. It was amazing. It got me unstuck. I probably need to continue that work with that person or someone else. I appreciate what you said, Toby, about the ketamine, because the ego is just so monstrous. And for me, like my brain wants to tell me all these things, and I just want to shut the part down sometimes, So, that's really interesting to hear. So thank you.
Ketamine is also often used as a gateway drug because the journey is like 2 hours. And it doesn't take you as far, as deep in as psilocybin does, or even further like ayahuasca does.
Awesome.
So if you wanted to come to Portland, there's a whole process that would take place. There's an intake process. We have 14 pages of questions we actually ask. There are rules and regulations that are required. We ask you for permission to touch, what your touch is with that. The Oregon Health Authority will not let us do much more than hold hands or touch a shoulder, because it can be triggering when somebody is in an altered state of consciousness. It can be called altered states of consciousness, which is what I prefer, because when I work with it, I go in with intention, where it can be called non-ordinary state, and that kind of sounds too passive for me. So you do the intake, and then the thing that you really want to do when you're doing the work, any of the work, even ketamine, set an intention of how you want to work with the medicine. And the medicine will work with you, and you need to trust that the medicine will provide that for you, because it does. And be clear with your intention too, because if we're not, sometimes it will take you into areas that could be like, whoa, that was more than I anticipated, but you weren't really clearly specific with what you intended. And then following that, it's not required by the state, but definitely if you're working with a guide or facilitator, be sure you have an integration session. And integration sessions can be 24 hours later or months later, or people can integrate some of their journey work for years.
Beautiful. Any last comment before we close?
Yeah, really quick. Where do you get the information for these workshops and what you're doing?
I put my email address, the correct one, up on. I must have had some dyslexia when I sent it to Kirk. It's j.asc, altered states of consciousness therapy, and therapy is full, asctherapy@gmail.com. And I'm working on a website. Yana's working on his website, and we'll be linking those two as soon as they're ready. So
great.
But I'm happy to work giving you all kinds of ideas and resources, and to help you get educated about it, because the more educated you are, the more you'll be able to anticipate what your experience could be like. But as a facilitator, I will never be able to tell somebody exactly what their experience is going to be like. It's going to be unique to you.
Sure. Yeah, great. Well, beloved Jay, thank you so
Thank you so
much.
much. Thank you.
Yeah,
Oh, yes.
for being with us and informing us and getting us cooking with all of this. And my takeaway is definitely the message you got, which was you are the one, we are the ones, and
We are.
and it's been something we've talked about a lot in our community is kind of the Hopi prophecy, but so many of us are kind of waking up to we are the ones. And so thank you for that and for empowering us to go further on the journey.
Are you saying we're woke folk?
We are so woke. Oh my God.
My.
Oh my. Our presence in Florida will probably move the state into the ocean or something. Yeah. All right.
I just wondered if there was
Yeah.
any chance of staying on a little longer for
Okay.
conversation, even if you don't want to, you want to end the recording.
Are there people who can you all stay? Or
Yeah, yes.
request?
But I also want to share that Jan and I are going at 7:00 tonight to the Portland Men's Psychedelic Group. For the first
Oh,
time.
cool. Well, we just primed a pump so you could just go in with intention. Great. Yeah, well, yeah. So let's take it a little bit further then. It's if you're willing to stay with us. If any of you have to exit, thank you very much. But
Thank you all. Thank you
we
all.
keep recording. So yeah, Barbara, it sounds like you
Yeah.
have
Well,
some
yeah, there were
yeah.
a lot of things that kind of percolated for
Yeah.
me. And just first of all, Jay, I just so appreciated the depth of your story, your personal story. And I have a question response about I'd had my own first ever psychedelic experience just a couple of months ago. It was part of my 80th birthday year celebration to myself. And it was wonderful. But as I'm hearing you speak now, I mean, part of what I wanted to get out of it, part of my intention was wanting more joy in my life. And that seemed to have happened, seems to be, evolving. But I also, just in this last little bit of thing, I'm thinking, okay, part of this, I had expected to kind of go in and think, oh, well, I'll learn about death and dying and, what's it going to be like? But I think it's really about what is life like between now and whenever that is. And we are the ones just comes to me. I think I'm going to have to reflect on this more. So if I'm feeling more joy and I am part of I am the one, we are the ones, what does that mean? So I really just thank you for that. Mm. The curious question I had was, did the plant medicine, I think the answer is probably obviously yes, but I just wondered how you think the plant medicine helped you with the religious trauma that you experienced. Was it specific as part of the journey, or is it an evolving thing? I'm just kind of curious.
I think the thing for me was just that the message was that we're all connected. Everything's connected. And religion right now is very divisive.
Yeah.
And most of the teachings are fearful and hateful. And so it was just kind of like all that wiring that I was domesticated with, that I was taught to be judgmental and that I would be judged. Just kind of like, no, that was silliness. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's no truth there. There's no validity in it.
Beautiful.
Religious trauma will probably become a new part of the DSM as a form of PTSD. And it's certainly prevalent in the queer community.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any last brewing moments of question or comment?
Yes, I would like to make a comment.
Nico, go for it. Yeah.
There might be a question involved here, but I appreciated the sense of you being in this middle part, bringing in the trauma of ancestors and being able to, with the use of tools, open those pathways for healing that for me that is something that touched me as far as being told the opposite growing up. So knowing that previous generations didn't have that story directly with me. So that's coming into you, and then towards the future of empowering the future with discovering these nuggets at a younger age. And so creating those pathways with the use of tools, including mushrooms and drumming as a heartbeat. So like music is something that resonates with me, that unites generations a lot. So there's this music therapy of grandparents having their grandchildren create the music playlists from when the grandparents were in high school, or when they would go to the diner and put the jukebox. So they would create these playlists, and the grandparents would listen to that, and a lot of symptoms of Alzheimer's and dementia would start to dissolve, of them remembering when they heard these songs so many times, because these were like records that would play several times. So it's very lovely to hear you put that in the words, in the form of your story and your experience. So that wasn't a question, just an observation. Yeah.
It's beautiful you brought that up. Thank you. Because music is such a huge part of the psychedelic journeys, and people spend hours setting up playlists to play through it. And it's amazing how the music can shift you, and you can go in waves with the music that take you from one place to the next. I did my clinical internship in San Francisco with the elderly, and some of the people with dementia could not put a sentence together, but I could start singing and they could sing every word of that song.
Yeah.
The part of the brain that retains that.
Yeah.
And when it's used in psychedelic sessions or journey work, I imagine that when somebody hears that song out of journey work, they're going to go, whoa, this is what I was feeling then.
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you.
Great.
Yeah, that relates to what Kirk and Donnie have done when I've attended there. I pick up that they also put attention on the playlists as well. So thank you, Jay, for everything. And congratulations with Jay.
Absolutely. All right. I think we are going to need to wind up and let them go out to their meeting. But thank you all for being with us. Jan, are you?
So just a little plug. So we're going to do an interview. Jay's going to do an interview this Friday at 4.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
I put my email. You can also email Jay about this, but this is going to be psilocybin therapy more from an animistic approach. And then later we're going to do psilocybin therapy more from a shamanic approach. So if you ever were curious what's the difference between animism and shamanism, come.
Excellent. Thank you for inviting us into diving in deeper and getting more knowledge. So great. All right, beloveds, namaste to you all. We love you, and stay tuned for another Queer Tribe call coming soon.
Thank you, Donnie. Thank you, Kirk.
Thank you.
You all.
Namaste.